Hey Tech Math, here are the guided notes for 10.3. Again, I did a little preview of this in my first video, but now we're going to go a little bit more in depth. So the mode for a set of numbers is the number in a data set, that occurs most. So real world examples of mode. Let's think about this. What is a data point that occurs the most? We may have test scores. What is the most plentiful test score on anything? It can be any type of score as well. A driver's test score would be another mode. More kids may get a lower number than a higher number, or vice versa, depending on how bad of a driver you are. What are some other things where mode might come up? I want you to think of two more and write those down. I don't want to give you a ton of examples. I want you to think of some. So I'm going to leave those open for you. So once we know a few real world examples, finding the mode is actually really easy, because if we know it's the one that occurs the most, we're just going to look at our data set. In this case, here's my example. I have 112, I have 114, I have 3 15s, and then one of each of my other numbers. It makes sense then that the one that occurs the most is going to be 15. So my mode in this case is 15. You'll notice if we did a little investigative work here as well, that when I find the median, it is also 15. Modes and medians sometimes coincide, sometimes not, but it's always good to look for. All right, let's do another one. I really like these because they're fast. Median and mean, they take a little bit more work, but mode is usually just to see how many you've got and then find out. So I've got 292s, I've got 2 of these. I've got 295s, and then I've got 1 of everything else, and then I already took these into account. So notice in this one, I have 2 numbers that occur the most often. Unlike median, I can have 2 modes. I'm going to put that here. Can have 2 modes. That is acceptable. So my modes in this case, I'm going to take both of these numbers and say that my mode is both 92 and 95. Those are the ones that occur the most. So let's think about another real life example of this, not with 92 and 5, but what are the most common points to be scored in a basketball game? Probably 2s and 3s. There's the option of a 1 point, but free throws are not the main method of scoring, so they would not be the mode or the most common way of scoring points. All right, example number 3. I've got 120, 133, 1 of each. So in this case, I have 1 of each, and there's no main mode. So in this one, I would just write no mode. There's no number that shows up more commonly than the others. They all show up the same amount of times. All right, last thing on this agenda is the stem and leaf plots. So stem and leaf plots are a visual way of finding mode. So our stem is always going to be our tens place, or our highest value place. And then our leaf is always going to be our ones place, or our lowest value. And it looks something like this. Stem, leaf. So my stem in this case is going to be my tens place. The lowest tens place I have is going to be a 1, a 10. The next highest I see is a 2. I have a 2 in my tens place, so the 20s are my next highest. And then finally, I've got a few 3s and then a 4 and a 5. So I need 1 stem for each of those. And those tell me that those are the tens place values. Next, if I want to set up a leaf, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tens digit off of each of these, and I'm going to just write the ones position in numerical order behind it. So these are really nice. They're already in order for me. So my leaves in this case, if I take the 10 off of this 12, I have a 2, a 5, a 7, and then I have an 8, an 8, and an 8. Notice I am putting one data point, 1 8, for each data point I have. This is really important if you're finding mode, because you don't just want to write 1 if you have 3 data points. All right, 20s, I've got a 0, because when I take off the 0 off this, I still have a 0 in the ones place. A 3, a 5, a 5, a 7, and an 8. There's no comma here, but there's technically one there. For 30s, I have a 2, a 6, and a 6. For 40, I have a 5, and then a 0. So now if I need to find mode, it's a lot easier to look at this data and say which of these numbers occurs the most instead of trying to pick it out from this list. So I see that I have 3 8s right here. Remember, those were attached to the stem. So if I pull the stem and the leaf over, this table shows me that my mode is going to be 18. While we don't see a lot of stem and leaves in the real world, they can be really, really useful with doing modes where we have a very large list of numbers. All right, if you have any questions, let me know.